Yay! It's you. Hello, Shutter Squad. I'm Kate, your host, and in today's episode of The One Behind the Lens, we're diving into an essential but often overlooked topic for photographers and creative entrepreneurs: the legal side of your business. Now, I know Rachel is probably cringing as she hears this because she says at the beginning she hates leading with the legal side. So I just kind of dropped a little hint. Our guest today is Rachel Brenke, a powerhouse who combines photography, legal expertise, and business experience to give practical, real-world advice. From contracts and copyright to liability protection, Rachel will walk us through the non-negotiables that every creative should know. Not just theory, but actionable steps to protect your work and your business. We'll also touch on topics like AI and legal considerations, personal branding, and managing your business. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how legal protection is an investment, not just a checklist, and how being authentic in your brand can actually attract the right clients. Welcome to the One Behind the Lens, the show for photographers building bold, beautiful businesses behind the lens. I'm Kate Biz Bestie and I got one thing to say before we begin. Rachel, thank you so much for being on the One Behind the Lens.
I'm excited for this. I've been looking forward to this since you asked me to come on, so thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I think it is so important, especially photographers that are just starting out, that they're getting the legal, because we don't think about that. We're like, we're going to take photos, and we're not thinking of we got to protect ourselves and, protect the clients and know what we're doing in that sense. So I think this is going to be a really great episode.
I always hate to lead with legal because then people are like, oh, legal. I mean, who really wants to listen to a legal podcast? I mean,
I know. I know, but I'm like, it's so important. Like,
well, it is. And I think what's important for everyone to understand is, like, I didn't start out as a lawyer, right? I had other businesses. I was blind, like going into everything, flying blind. And I was figuring that out on my own. I did photography before I was a lawyer, and then I kind of married the two. And so law, legal stuff was not my first step when I first got into business either. So my perspective is really like, I can tell you the legal stuff all day long, but we have to see what the real world application of it is. Like, how much time and money are you going to put into it? How can you prevent issues? And so I kind of look at it, not any lawyer can give you the law, but my perspective is very from like, I had my camera, bootstrap my business. I didn't really know much about this stuff. And then the real world application of it is what's I try to bring, and why I feel like I'm a bit different than most other lawyers.
I love that. And I love that you're saying, like, it's, well, that you have the photography background side of it, so you're just like the listeners, and that you're bringing the real world, so it's not just like you said, like where someone's, even when you just say the word legal, people are like, oh no, but
that's why I never lead with I'm a lawyer when people ask what I do.
Oh, that's amazing. So what do you say?
I typically say I'm a business owner. I do have a law firm and a couple e-commerce businesses. And if they have follow-up questions, I go into that. But I never, when people introduce me as a lawyer, I'm always like, lawyers have, there's all the lawyer jokes, there's negative connotations, and I don't want them to perceive from that bias. I want them to take what I'm saying seriously.
Right.
I am in my perspective.
Right. That makes sense. So what are some of your other businesses that you have? Let
So
us know
most of the
about.
stuff now does all center around legal. I have had an online apparel store in the past. I've done different blogs and podcasting outside this realm. I have my business consulting, which I've done for many, many years. And so that's not legal. That's working on planning, strategy, marketing, that sort of stuff. I'm not really known well. Obviously, I put myself out for legal. I love strategy and marketing, and I really try to integrate that with my legal as well. But right now, to answer your question, I primarily have my law firm, the Law Tog for photographers, and then a couple other, basically the Law Tog in different outfits for different industries.
Got it. Got it. I love that. And how long has it been? It's been like, has it been about 15
How old is my
years?
oldest daughter? Yeah, so it's been over 15 years. I set up the Law Tog basically when I was in labor with her. I was like, this is the name, this is what we're going to do.
Wow. I love it. I love that. It just like all just came out like,
I mean, you got to focus on something other than the pain of labor.
oh,
So,
right, right. Now, because you're focusing, like the Law Tog is focusing on photographers, creatives, things like that. Was it because of your photography background that you were wanting to
yeah.
start
So when I
that?
went to law school, I didn't even think, mind you, the timeline of it, I had already been in business at this point. I do the math based on my kid's age. So about 10, 11 years at this point, I had been doing the other business stuff, blogging, just trying to help other business owners from the business side of things, not legal.
Hmm.
And I just got and when I went to law school, I thought, no, I'm not going to do this forever because I had this pull that I wanted to help people. But I had this mindset that what I was doing, because it was basically like for profit and it really wasn't targeting in on like human rights or children's advocacy or anything like that, I struggled for a long time, even in law school and up until a few years ago, that I wasn't doing good in the world. Like it's not surprising, I'm a lawyer, I'm also a Libra. I've always had this justice warrior in me. So I went to law school thinking I was going to go into prosecution, specifically of child sex crimes. Shout out to Olivia Benson at SVU. That's what my oldest daughter is named after.
Oh, wow. I
And
love that.
yeah. And what's funny is when I was doing photography during law school, because technically you're not supposed to work, but it was one of those things that we needed money. And I was getting into photography and enjoyed it. And I said, well, I can make some extra cash. It's flexible on the side. On the side, loosely, we all know, really, like even on the side is not on the side. But as I went through law school, people would hear whether they were law students or outside of the school, they would just ask me questions about like copyright and photographers' rights. And there were a few resources at the time, but not really. And so by the time I graduated law school, I said, you know what? There's something here. Let's marry this. Let's make this a thing for photographers. Let's see how it goes. And the rest is basically history at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I love that it all came like kind of
Mhm.
full circle. And you are helping people like that you were, that's what you wanted to do, that's what kind of you set out to do when you decided to become a lawyer.
It took me a while to get there. It probably was 5, 6, 7 years after I graduated law school and had the law talk going. I still always had this pull. So I still, like donate time to other issues and things like that in the community. And it took a few phone calls with clients, photographers, and others where we had other parents. You didn't have to be a parent, but that's just what it came out to be of thank you so much for protecting my business. This is the livelihood that I can put money on the table. I had one client that really was the tipping point. She was trying to leave a domestic violence situation with her 3 kids. And I had dealt with a trademark issue for her and it was going to crumble her whole brand if she lost it and all her revenue. And she's just crying to me on the phone. And now, mind you, this wasn't pro bono. She was paying me for everything. And she's just crying me and thanking me. And she was able to leave that situation. And that's kind of like when the light bulb went off of, you can help people even if it's not in a typical way. And I see this with photographers as well. I've heard from some photographers, how can I do good with my camera or this and that? I'm like, you are doing good. And there's a broad variety of things that we could dig into on that. But I feel like in any business, if you have that heart focus, you can do good. You just have to adjust your own
Mm.
perspective of what that looks like.
So you were kind of talking about parents, and so I want to kind of ask you this question. you're obviously passionate about supporting the invisible load many parents carry. What are practical ways entrepreneurs can tackle that burden?
Oh my goodness. And everyone's circumstance is going to be different, right? So I'm a single mom now. For much of my career, I had a partner that I was married to. But I still feel like my advisement is the same, just the application may be different. So before I go into that, I think the important thing to remember is we go through phases of life. Maybe your marital status changes, maybe your economic status changes, whatever that looks like. And I definitely saw this specifically during pandemic when everything shut down. So I have 5 kids and they're all home having to do, online schooling. Well, they're doing online schooling in the day when I'm supposed to be working in the day. And the tips I'm going to give in a second, I just remember starting to feel burnout. So, head down, nose to the grindstone, got to make this happen, still got to make money, got to help these kids with their education. And I realized I can still take the same structure I had before. I just have to be flexible with that structure. So the big things that I look for as much as possible is management of schedule, which can be very difficult if it's variable. But what I mean by that is I try to schedule my weeks pretty consistently the same. Block scheduling, right? Like the certain time in the morning is all for admin emails, and then different days are different things. And there's psychological reasons behind doing that as well. If you're in a creative process, you don't want to spend 15 minutes there, jump over to something that's like an admin process. You're not as effective. So I think block scheduling, if you're able to, as much as possible. The pandemic example, I just had to start shifting clients into the evenings, and it actually worked out because many of them were working parents too, with kids also at home. So like now in my situation, I still have to be flexible with that. Used to have super rigid 9 a.m. workout, 10 a.m. emails. Like you have to be flexible with that. I think the other thing too is pre-planning your week. And this sounds so basic, but I think that's the basic tips are the ones that are the best for success. The more advanced systems and all this, like intricate stuff is where people start to get tripped up. So for me, before the week starts, I try to sit down and create my list, even though I'm not taking any action items. It's just so that when I come in on Monday and sit down at my desk, I'm not spending half the day creating that list. So I know, like, I start with what are the revenue producing activities that I need to do because I need money. Responses to clients. And notice I haven't even mentioned legal yet. Even though it's important, you're not going to be able to do legal if you're not bringing in revenue. And so I just look at it kind of in a priority fashion. I have 2 main lists. I have a to-do list and a global list. So your global list is stuff that you have to do all the time. So that's kind of where you're going to put legal, updating the contracts, this and that. You're going to refer to that list when you have more open week or more open time, because all of us go in cycles. Photographers, family photographers, you're slammed in the fall. Wedding photographers, spring and fall. So you're not necessarily going to want to try to schedule with me as your lawyer to do an audit or a contract review when your hair's on fire trying to edit 14 weddings. You're going to wait and do that when you have. So that's why we have the global list. So we keep an eye on what we need to get done, but it's not an immediate need. The to-do list is the one I was just kind of mentioning a bit ago. These are the ones that have to happen this week. I got to bring in revenue. I got to respond to clients. I've got to edit galleries. I've got to order, and you just go through and just kind of put on there in priority order. So when you sit down to work in your block scheduling, you're not wasting time planning.
Yeah. I think that's great. And I think, it's kind of like when you were talking about every week you sit down and you kind of look at what your week is and what you have to. It's almost like, when as a parent or as just anybody, when you're looking at how to like do your food, like your meal planning, it's just in a different way. And I feel like doing that, like you said, it sounds so basic, but I feel like you also don't feel so overwhelmed.
Correct.
Because you can look at your week and go, okay, like you said, these are the things that need to get done. These are things that they have to be done, but doesn't have to right this second.
And a lot of the stuff on the global list will end up being things you don't really like to do. Pay your sales tax, update your contracts. And so it's really easy that when you're in the, the grind of the business work, you forget to do that. And the most classic example that I see is contracts specifically. So I will bring out legal here. Your contract should be a living, breathing document that grows with your business and your clientele, because you're going to evolve as a business owner, pricing, your policies, you're going to run into new client issues. And so getting one drafted is great. You should have that, but you need to keep top of mind of like the top questions that your clients have, the sticking points that they may have, changes in law, which is my job to bring out to you, which I do at the Law Talk. But so that when you have that global list and you're going to have kind of a down period in order to tackle some of that admin stuff, including the legal, that's when you can come into me and you've already created a running list of like the top questions that clients give you. When's my gallery going to be ready? When do I have to do this? And that's like the number one. When are my photos going to be ready?
Yes, yes.
And then also rights of photos, who owns the rights and that sort of thing. And sometimes we just need to massage and grow that contract, but we're not going to do that in the throes of your wedding season. So we want to have it on your radar and keep those questions in a list for me. And then when you do have downtime, pull from that global list. It goes from global to do when it's a down period, and then we get it done.
Right, right. Would you recommend, so if you're a photographer that's just really just kind of starting out and like I'm gonna be a wedding, or I'm gonna be a family photographer, like we're gonna, or at least right now, this is what I'm gonna do. Before you even go into a session, book a session, even put out there that you're doing this, should you have your contract and all of that ready to go?
If I had to pick one thing out of all the legal tools to have, I think your contract is going to be your best bet for multiple reasons. One, it's going to give you legal protection. It's not bulletproof, but it's going to give you legal protection. It's going to set expectations with your clients. It's going to help reduce communications, hopefully, that you have to do with your clients, which saves you time and money because you're not answering the same questions that are already in the contract. I put an asterisk on that. Let's be real. Clients don't really ever read the contract, but it's easy for you then just to copy paste the piece from the contract and send it back to them. Yeah, if I had to pick one of the legal tools that we have available, especially if you're starting out, contracts is probably the cheapest and low-hanging fruit that you can get that's going to give you all these benefits.
Let's pause for something that's totally worth pausing for. If you're juggling a million tools to run your business, let me put you on to something better. I've been using photobiz.com for over 10 years for my website, blog, booking mini sessions, even scheduling podcast guests. I can capture emails and send out newsletters all in one place. And honestly, I haven't even scratched the surface on everything PhotoBiz can do. It's easy, professional, and their customer support is a chef's kiss. And guess what? Just for listeners of The One Behind the Lens, you'll get 25% off your first year with the code POD25. That's POD25. Or by hitting the link in the show notes. Covering topics like trademark wars and like legal pitfalls, what's one story that still resonates with you and taught you like a key lesson?
Oh my goodness. It's going to be pretty overarching. For photographers specifically, it's going to be under copyright, right? The protection of our photos. And I just almost said that actually with the contract thing too. I just kind of mentioned setting expectations. And within that contract, you can set the expectations of who owns the photographs, what the clients can do with the photographs, because the number one thing that I do in my law firm on behalf of photographers is pursuing copyright infringement. So when someone else takes, and I say someone, it can be a company, an individual, whoever, takes and utilizes your photos for commercial gain, whether it's social media, it's on a flyer, whatever, product packaging, whatever that looks like. And this is so prevalent because happening to photographers because of the internet, right? It's so easy just to snag something off of there and be used. And I don't typically see that clients are the ones you're a photographer, you have a client, your client's not necessarily the one that's going to step out of the contract and use it infringement wise. It's typically an unknown third party, a major hotel chain, the travel industry is actually the worst that I've seen for this. So having your contracts good to set the expectations of the clients, I think that kind of keeps them in check. But understanding also your rights of copyright, and that's the biggest takeaway to answer your question, is the importance of learning really what copyright means, how to prevent issues, and then be ready when it does happen, because it is going to happen. Inevitably, it will at some point that your photograph is going to be used. And in my opinion, you should be compensated. And I also feel like we have a duty as photographers to stand up for our rights, because if we don't, then it's just a runaway car at that point.
Well, yeah. And I didn't even think about, I have had, has not happened to me, at least I don't think it has, where I've had other photographer friends that their images have been taken and put on like another photographer's website and saying that that was their images. And she was like, wait a minute, those are mine. And so I didn't even think about the like travel industry.
Yeah, I've had clients who they discover, it is crazy how infringement works. Like our recording, we were talking about how people in the wild know me even if they're not photographers, and they connect with people. I think the world's also small when it comes to the usage of photography, because a photographer will share a photo and all of a sudden they're getting a text from their friends saying, hey, I was driving down I-95. Isn't that your photo on this billboard that's being advertised? Congrats on the licensing. And the photographer's like, what are you talking about? It was just pulled from the internet and used. And that happens way more often than anyone really thinks. Now, we were talking earlier, the law, obviously you have rights there, but then we would talk through like the real world application. Is it worthwhile pursuing? What does that look like? What are the mechanisms and tools? But yeah, it's pretty prevalent, and it's really kind of sad because, and I have a list on my law firm website of major companies that I've gone against. That's another like doing good. Like I feel really good when I could be representing photographers against major corporations. Major corporations do this a lot. And I don't necessarily think it's nefarious. I don't think you've got some guy sitting in some headquarters somewhere going, oh, we're going to take and use this photographer's photo. They're just big machines. And I'm not justifying their behavior and the actions and the impact on photographers, but they're major corporations, they're major machines. They've got different agencies, like marketing agencies that they contract. And so it happens just because there's so many wheels going on. And I think that's where it's on us as the photographer, being knowledgeable of our rights, leveraging our rights. And sadly, we have to educate these corporations and pursue them, but it happens a lot.
Wow.
But yeah, travel industry, I'm not sure why. On my list, I think travel is the top. And that's like hotels, cruises, and I guess I should say hospitality, not travel also.
Interesting. So are they they see that the person, like a photographer, they're using where they were at some location or they were at kind of thing?
Completely. I had a case where it was a cruise line and they were advertising their own photographers so that we go on a cruise and get married, use our photographer, we'll take your photos. This photographer never shot on a cruise ship. I don't even think she'd ever been on a cruise before, had never discussed with this cruise line. The pictures weren't even with water in the background or any like tropical. It was so weird. And it was like in a garden somewhere up in Maryland. Beautiful photo. And this cruise line snagged it and was using it all over their website to advertise their own photography services.
Wow. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting about that is I see like on TikTok and things like that or reels or anything like that, there's so many people that they're talking about how they do this with their phone, where they're like, I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And I'm now, being paid to do all of this. So I guess I just assumed they're just getting these, influencers to do all of that. But
I mean, sometimes like if you're hired by a company, you as a photographer is hired by a company, hopefully you have a good contract with them. That is when I'll see sometimes the companies will step out of the contract with their rights. But the cases that I take are pretty much like the cruise one. She had never talked to the cruise line, completely separate. It's just snagged and used.
huh.
I know. Who would have thought? It's wild.
Yeah, that is wild.
I mean, I have people that snag photos of me all the time. And people will let me know, or they'll even tag me in it. And I'm like, all you had to do is ask, right? Like, I own all my own photographs for these reasons. So if I come to you and I'm like, hey, will you do personal heads? Well, I'm say personal headshots of me. I'm going to ask for the copyrights because my stuff is used so much. I want to be able to enforce it and control my brand. And I'm going to pay you handsomely for that. But because I want to have the rights management over that. So when this stuff happens, if my photo ends up on a brand that my values don't align with or something like that, I have the recourse to be able to pull it back.
I think that's a great way, to talk about the copyright, like that photographers, especially, I mean, even ones that have been in, photography for years
I
and
know
years
where
and
you're going with
years.
this. Yeah.
Where with the copyright of if a usually a client will say like if they don't understand what the copyright means, if they're not someone like you using it, they're it's just their family stuff, and I'll say, well, you get a use license, or this is how we're doing it, but I'm keeping the copyright. How does that all, how would you say it in a simple way of that working, of if a photographer is asked
Mm-hmm.
that?
Well, I think before we get into that, we need to clarify that what really copyright is, right? That's the ownership of the
Yes.
photographs. And mind you, we're in the United States. So by default, us as the photographers do have common law copyright protections in our work. And actually 99% of the infringement actions that I take are unregistered works. I wish they were registered. We can talk about that later, but you still have rights within that unless you took the photographs under like an employment scope with a company or you sign it away by contract. And why I think, and this is so funny, I'm going to say something and then I'm going to kind of contradict myself a little bit, but I'll explain. But I see in photography groups, and I thought this is where you were going, because even seasoned photographers will be like, keep your copyright no matter what. Okay. I do agree with that to a point. We want to be able to manage our brand. We want to be able to use it for marketing, which we still can do even if we sell the photographs. So like, for example, if I hired you to take my headshots, I own the copyright, I still would license you back a usage so you could use it in marketing. So just because you transfer copyright doesn't mean there's not a mechanism for you to be able to still utilize it in marketing. The other piece of that is, and I see this, I do a lot of commercial photographer work, like working on their legal stuff. And so this is more in their realm, but this can happen for like wedding and family photographers as well, that you could leverage one session or one wedding to make more money when you are retaining the copyright. For example, let's say you do a wedding. If you are so insistent on keeping the copyright, but you only deliver to the clients and it just sits on your drive and gathers digital dust, then you're losing out on money. You could have taken and gone and done venue shots that you could license or sell to the venue, the dress, the shoes, the tux, the flowers, whatever that looks like. And I'm not saying you have to go charge all these vendors, but if you retain copyright, you do have the potential for those additional revenue streams. And just like we said, you can license it out or you can sell it to them and get a license back. So there can be a two-way street with all of this. I think what happens is a lot of times people are like, never give away copyright. And the example I always give is the one that we've just mentioned multiple times, is where like for someone like myself, I want to have control of the rights management because of my brand and things like that. To answer your question though, when you're working with a standard client who definitely is not within the industry or anything like that, when they just use the term rights or they'll throw out copyright, I think we just need to explain there's a difference between, and you kind of already said it, ownership and usage. And there's an element of like privacy in there as well. And I think a lot of times the clients are saying they want the rights so that either they can have privacy, they can control where it goes. And I'm not talking influencers, I'm not talking brand photos. This is just like standard, like personal photos. I just think it's a misunderstanding, and we just need to, what I would do is I would ask them, what rights are you looking for and what do you plan to do with it? And let's see if we can walk through this together, because I, the photographer, am knowledgeable of copyright law. And that will be really illuminating to really figure out what they want. Because sometimes clients will say, like, I live in the DC area, so there's a lot of three-letter agencies, FBI, CIA, and things like that, where they can't be online. So they'll ask for the rights because they want to manage it because of their careers, and they're not able to have that, especially in like boudoir and things like that. So just kind of getting an understanding of where your client is coming from. And I think that's a missing piece that I see in conversations and Facebook groups, especially in the Law Talk. And I try to get in there as much as I can to talk about this stuff. But understanding what the client is actually asking for, as opposed to going, oh my God, this client wants copyright. Rah! It's like, slow the roll for a second. And I get it as an artist too, right? I am also would be like, why do you want my work? Oh my goodness. Like I get that impulse. I totally get it. Like I'm not knocking that. But I think us as the business owner, we have, and the photographer, we have to remember we are leading our clients down this path through our contract, through our conversations, through education. And so by simply pausing and asking questions will prepare you for how to best respond. Because for example, I have had situations where I've reached out with my situation where I've reached out to photographers and have said, hey, by the way, I'm the Law Talk. I don't ever want them to think it's like deceptive or anything. And I'll say, I am seeking copyright. And I'll kind of give a little explanation. And they're like, no, but they won't talk to me to like figure out the reasons why. And that's okay. That's their business decision. Fine. I'll move on to the next one. I'll pay the next one the money. That's okay with me. But I feel like there's a lot of situations, not just mine, but other ones. If we just ask the questions, we can really kind of figure out what's behind the ask. Same thing like when it comes to pricing, you can use that same application. If a client's like, this isn't my budget, ask the question, well, what were you looking for in this budget, within the budget? Like, how can we tailor this? What does this look like? What is your perception of what you believed you would receive for X?
I absolutely, that was amazing. Like I was just sitting here just like,
I'm very long-winded. I'm sorry.
No, I loved it because I just think that a lot of photographers, including myself, you're thinking the copyright, like I have not even thought of it that way. I have not thought of it, like you said, FBI, CIA, or, or CIA. Yeah. I was like, did I say that right? Like that they're not being like, I want it because it's mine and I paid for it. Because sometimes I do get that where, I'll have a client, they're like, well, I paid you for that.
Yeah.
Type thing. But they're saying like, hey, I don't want my boudoir out there, or I don't want anything because I am, I can't have things out in the wild for anyone to find me. Or if it is just I don't it doesn't
They
even
just
have
won't.
to be an FBI agent or anything like that. I don't want my stuff out there, and I will pay you for that. That
But
was
I want to say
amazing.
one thing on that. Like, a lot of people say if you're going to sell copyright, it's got to be tens of thousands of dollars. And I'm giving everything, guys, that you're hearing from me is just kind of my experience as a business owner, as a lawyer, as a photographer, what I've seen working with you all. You can take it, digest it, throw it all away if you want to. I've done this long enough that I also am trying to look at it more than just the initial sale. So, for example, when I first was presented with these situations with living in this area with sensitive careers, and we've got politicians and all that stuff here too,
Right.
that I made the decision then. I could be well within my rights to retain copyright and go under a privacy agreement and charge for that. Well, in my rights to charge handsomely for the copyright. I chose, because I was looking at my market and how heavy my market is here, I chose strategically from the very beginning that if they ask for copyright, fine. Because even if I retained it, I can't go do those revenue streams like we talked about before with the wedding. I can't use it. So I took the perspective of I would rather, obviously I asked the client so I fully understand like what they're trying to accomplish and how that fits with my needs and my business policies. But I made the decision years ago that if they asked for that and they gave me kind of this explanation, we're talking about like career, and they may have been in like a foster situation, a DV situation, or something like that, I would rather just transfer it to them, sell it to them. I don't add any extra fees. And I have seen the return 10, 20, 30 fold because of referrals. So instead of using that one session, then you could negotiate, and I've seen this a lot, like with weddings, you can negotiate where you don't put recognizable photos of them up. Maybe just use detail shots or things like that. And, that's all session specific, the client specific. But to me, it wasn't worth having 3 photos that I use out of the session that doesn't have anybody recognizable and lose the year's worth of referrals. And so what's funny is I don't really publicly put this out there. I still do photography. I don't advertise it, but all those family clients that I had had for years, and I never advertised really family sessions either. Once I moved into boudoir and commercial photography, I do them just for old repeat clients. So that's still a revenue stream for me based on knowing my copyright rights and what the client wanted. So I'm still able to do it. I just don't leverage it in marketing.
I was going to ask you if you still did photography.
I do. I mean, it is prior clients, or if it's a really good referral from one of them. I just don't have the time with all the legal work now.
Right. Well, and I think that's great though, that if you're doing something for you, like in the set, even, I know you're doing it for clients, but it could be something that it's still your artistic, like, yeah, I love that.
That's one reason I'm looking forward to fall, because I've already started getting some messages. Are you still doing that? Because I see it online. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it for you.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, and you're like saying, like, you're kind of pre-planning like your global and your week, like kind of getting all of it ready to go.
Yep.
And it's funny how you said that about maybe like foster. I have done where with families and where they're like, please, don't post any. And I didn't even like, I was just like, oh yeah, totally get it. And they are families that I have photographed for years, and I don't really do families too much anymore. I'm more doing like headshot high school seniors, but I still will do those families. And now they, are adopted and I can show them off. But yes, there were those times. And I didn't even think about where, oh, well, I don't want to photograph you if I can't market, use these. It was just, I really just was like, I totally get it.
But that's a common thing that I see. And it's been like this for years. I'm so old in this industry now that it's consistently said in groups and at conferences, if you can't use them, either charge them X amount or more or don't take it. And I understand we have to have enough sessions in order to advertise, right? We have to show our product. But kind of like I said, the decision I made where I said, I'm going to go into this, and if the clients ask for me not to share it or transfer the copyright, I just knew in my mind, okay, Rachel, you got to start thinking, are you going to do model calls that you can use? Are you going to reach out to people? So you can balance it out. And I know it kind of sucks because it's not a paid session necessarily, but I found just by byproduct of doing the perspective, the approach that I did, I still got more paid sessions without having to do extra marketing that I could share, because not everyone works in those fields. Some are, they've got networks. Everyone's willing to talk, and it's how you treat them and make them feel and listen to their situation. That's going to go way beyond how good your photography is.
Oh yeah. Yes. I 50% agree with that one.
But again, at the end of the day, like I'm saying, like if you're a business owner, and I know that this can sound really overwhelming, especially if you're really new. So I actually would encourage you guys to save this episode, take some notes down, put it on the global list to come back and revisit later. But you may not run into these situations yet, but just bookmark it to come back and listen. You can make a policy now that says, you know what, all that's too complex. I'm just going to turn them away. I'm going to charge them more, whatever that looks like for you. Guess what? You're free to change that in 2 weeks, a year down the road. I could revert back to start charging for it if I wanted to. That's the beauty of being in charge. If you know your legal rights, you're able to communicate it effectively to the client, and you understand what the client wants, you relatively, quote unquote, can get to do what you want to do because it's your business. You set the policies.
Right. And I love like talent, I feel like there's a lot for any business is educating your client. So knowing the information so that you can educate the client. Like you said, where, the whole with the copyright of, well, I want the copyrights. Well, what exactly are you thinking, and not going, well, no, I'm not giving you the copyrights, but hey, what are you actually wanting to use these for? What are you thinking copyright that you need these for copyright? But
Here's something I want the listeners to think about. When you got into being a photographer, think about your level of understanding of copyright, either then or now. Your clients have not only less than that, they probably have misinformation of that. So, and you said it, I don't know what exact word you used, but we kind of have an obligation for education of our clients. And I'm not saying you have to sit them down and be like, let me give you a whole copyright lesson on this, but you can put it into normal conversation. But I think we just have to keep in mind that these clients only know like what they see on the internet. And so they're going based on patterns, like for example, with social media. We share memes and GIFs and stuff all day long. It seems pretty, benign, no big deal. So in their mind, it's no different than the photographs that you're taking. So yeah, it is just keep in mind it's our obligation. But again, it's your prerogative. If you don't want to bother to educate the clients, you don't want to invest that time, or you're scared to, that's okay. You don't have to take those clients.
Time out, friends. Let's talk about what's in my cup every single morning. Coffee Roaster of Lincoln, Nebraska. Freshly roasted, full of flavor, and honestly, it's the real MVP of my morning routine. They ship anywhere in the U.S., no matter where you live. Nebraska's best can be in your mug, too. Use code TOBTL for 5% off your online order. That's TOBTL. Or just hit that link in the show notes and thank me later. Support small, sip strong, stay caffeinated. Talking a little bit about online, Instagram, Facebook, all the things. Like that's where photographers you are sharing constantly with protection on that of little advice.
So this is where I've got the competing lawyer brain plus real world application brain that goes on. So I'll give you the legal side and then we'll go into real world application. But just keep in mind, once you put anything out there, whether you're putting on social, website, delivering to client, there is a potential for your photographs to be used in a way that you did not license, sell, whatever. And so the legal mechanisms that you could do is, I mentioned already, we have common law copyrights here in the US, unless you sign it away by contract or you're like an employment situation. So we own it. We get to control the distribution, alteration, usage, etc. The next step to that is you could register copyright of all your photographs. Notice I said all your photographs. I'm going to put an asterisk on that because I'm going to come back to that. But what registration does, it provides a stronger protection in that there's increased damages. You can get attorney's fees back. It's just, you could file in court the next day if you wanted to. But like I mentioned, 99% of the cases that I get are unregistered works that have been infringed upon. Even though I've been preaching this for years, that's okay. No shame, no judgment. I get it. Because the lawyer me, this is where the asterisk comes back. The question always is, well, Rachel, if I'm just going to post on Instagram or I'm going to use this, which photographs do I register? The lawyer brain says, register them all. Now, my advisement pretty much is it's going to be, and that would be for full protection. If you are setting yourself up for that register protection for those photographs. But if you're looking at it from a real world application, you're probably going to go with the ones that you use the most often, right? Because you're going to find you're going to use key ones in your marketing repeatedly. They're your best work. They get the best engagement. That's really where I would start. Maybe ones that you're looking at, like we mentioned, the weddings and licensing out to like venues and to jewelry and dress companies and things like that. But I'm hesitant to say put in like this priority order of what you should register, because I've seen situations where photographers have done that. They're like, I took like the key 45 of the gallery. They were the best ones with the people, and those are protected. And then all of a sudden, the one that gets infringed is some grainy, blown out, off white balance, doesn't even look good photo that gets infringed upon, and the photographer's going, why would you steal that one? That's a little bit of extreme example, but basically it's not necessarily the ones that we would think that would be used, infringed upon. So that's why I say all of them. But I think to answer your question, yeah, if you're going to put it out there, you need to look at these mechanisms and tools. We mentioned the contract with the clients, just kind of setting the expectations with them. If you're going to license to anyone, use a contract as well. That's really all you can do. I mean, we can get into the conversation about watermarks and metadata. The problem with all the social media sites these days, the metadata gets stripped off the back end at upload. Don't come for me if that's changed, but last time I looked, that's what it was, Facebook specifically. I do like watermarks. Stick with me, don't turn off the podcast. I do like watermarks. And these are not in the photos that are being delivered to your client, although there's a whole nother argument for that too. These are the ones that you're just using on like social media marketing. I do like watermarks being on the photos, not from an artist perspective. I hate that. From a legal perspective, I won't say I hate it. I'm not judging you if you do it. I just feel like it takes away from the photo. I want to enjoy and embrace the feeling I'm getting from the photo. But from the legal side of things, if that watermark is cropped out, there's a very specific damages amount in the copyright law that allows for you to get recovery for that, whether it's registered or not. And so when I look at an infringement situation, we're looking at how it was delivered, like who was it exposed to? Was it registered? How it was used, how many times it was used, was it altered, was there metadata removed, was there a watermark removed? So if you're really wanting to go full send protection, use a watermark. I'll just leave that with you. I already told you my opinion on it from an artist perspective.
Right.
But the lawyer's side is I love when I have all those bad acts to tally up, because especially if I am pursuing an infringer on behalf of one of y'all and it's unregistered photos, the more bad acts I can tally up, the more stronger demand, because that side is going to freak out and just want to settle.
No, that makes sense. I know I am not one. I used to put watermarks on my images, and now when I put them out, I don't. But I'm like, I shouldn't say that, but I'm like, I just feel like they're out in the wild. And I'm like, nowadays, they could probably get that off of there, like, kind of thing too anymore, where I'm like, if you're going to put it out there, Kate, you're.
Yeah. I mean, that's just one of those, you got to understand the risks. And I'm not saying that if you don't watermark it, you can't pursue for copyright infringement. I'm just saying it removes that additional damages. I would still use the argument of infringement and however I could. It just gives us another little thing to throw in there on the demand. Is it a deterrent to infringers? I don't think so. Funny, when I got up this morning, someone had sent me a Facebook message of a group where someone had asked, hey, how do I get this watermark off this photo? So, I mean, it's happening, it's going to happen. So you guys just need to take the information that we just talked about and decide for your own business. The majority of photographers these days that I see, because I scroll and I look at y'all's Instagram, I'm poking around to see, I love to look at the work, and watermarks aren't being used.
Right. Yeah. So this is kind of like shifting a little bit, but I'd love to know this.
I always get scared.
I know. It's like, what is going to be asked?
What's next?
So you're a 6-time #1 bestseller author. Is that correct?
I wish it was #1 bestseller. I just have 7 books that have, my podcast was in the top 10 business podcasts for a while, right above Dave Ramsey, which I was really
wow, that's amazing. Did you I would have been celebrating that one.
Oh, I did. Screenshot, it was everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
No, my books aren't really, they are more of a pet project for me. I have Sugar Snaps, which is a children's photography book. It's Christmas based. No, I'm sorry, not that one. I've got the Photographer's Night Before Christmas. That's also photography based. That one's super fun because it's like the night before Christmas themed. Sugar Snaps is about a little girl who wants to be a photographer like her mother. And then the other one's just kind of aligned with my different brands. They're all based on my kids or life situations that I have going on. Like I have one for being a mom, doing triathlon and setting an example for your kids. And then I have some business ones too, but they're just for fun for me to do.
Oh, I love that. I love it. Photographer, lawyer, author. Holy moly, what do you not do? Mom,
cook. No, and my kids are like, you burn everything. I'm like, well, then y'all can start cooking. You're at that age now. No, I think what's important, we're talking all these things that I've done. This wasn't done in like a year. Like this has been 20 years of going on. And why I actually did photography besides just money and all of that during law school was I remember feeling like one side of my brain was being sucked dry with legal stuff. And I needed that balance. And so that's kind of where the books come in as well. I mean, I love legal, y'all. Don't get me wrong. Like you see, I get excited about it. I love the idea of protecting it. I think it's so incredibly important. But legal can kind of suck a little creativity from you. And though I try to inject creativity and strategy into it, that's where like the books and photography and everything kind of helps to balance me out.
So do you use like your personal story? Does that influence your legal and business brand?
I mean, I kind of threw that out there earlier with parents, and then I went, because really what I wanted to clarify was I don't just work with parents, but that's kind of my perspective because that's the season of life that I'm in. I've have, well, 4 minor children now. My oldest is an adult. But I am always looking at it from a perspective of business owner and parent and mom first. And because that's how I would operate for myself. Now, I'm not rigid in that. Like if you come to me and you're in a different situation, I still have enough, taking lessons from all the things that I've done. We'll still work on a good strategy. But yeah, everything, if I ever wrote out the timeline of everything that I've done, it all mirrors my personal life.
For the creatives that are probably listening right now, what would be 3 non-negotiables that they should do today to start legally protecting their business?
Non-negotiables. I mean, contract, we already established at the beginning. Understanding copyright. And so you can explain it for like the examples that we gave. I think the third would be understanding liability protection, because whether you are just putting yourself out for model calls all the way up through making tens of thousands of dollars, liability exists. Whether you take one session a year or you take 1,000 sessions a year, obviously statistically the liability potential goes up the more that you do, and depending on the type of photography. But within the liability protection, I'm kind of cheating your answer here. The liability protection kind of has 3 keys: contracts, business entity formation, and insurance, just because they kind of work as hurdles to protect you, provide you limited liability, your assets, especially if you have physical assets, investments, etc. But even then, even if you rent, lease, you don't have any physical assets, you're like, no big deal. You have to consider it. You still could get, if you don't have like an entity set up, you could be sued personally, and that judgment could go against you. We all have income earning potential, so it could touch your paycheck. So we all have an asset in some sense. So to recap the answers to that, the big 3 was contracts, copyright, and liability protection. And then the 3 under liability protection, again, contracts, business entity like a limited liability company or a corporation, and then having proper liability and equipment insurance. I cheated your answer.
Oh no, I loved it. I loved it. No, totally fine. I'm okay. I'm okay with
Lawyered.
the cheating. Yeah. I feel like I need like a graphic, like
I know.
a big lawyered graphic. Yes. Lawyered. Yeah. But I think that's great because again, I just sometimes when I first started out, I did not think all of these things that I had to do. Or like the liability, oh yeah, if even like for weddings, having the liability if I had a cord for a light, and if Aunt Edna tripped over that cord.
Poor Aunt Edna.
Yeah, poor Aunt, and like I'm protected. I can, I'm insured for, anything like that. So, and again, you're not thinking that. You're just like, oh, I'm shooting a wedding. And
I think that's the kind of a common theme of everything we've talked about is like the one variable you can't control is people. You don't, like when I pursue an infringer, I don't necessarily know how they're going to respond. I can use my experience, but we don't really know what that's going to look like. The wedding situation, you don't know, is Aunt Edna going to trip over the cord? Like we have to put mechanisms in place, because I will tell you, and I just had a conversation with a client yesterday about that. I probably had hundreds of these over the years. It is going to cost you 20 times more to clean up an issue than it is to try to prevent it from the front end. And I'm not saying your contract is going to be foolproof, but it's going to give you a leg up and other tools in a way that can help to protect resources. So this kind of goes back to, you asked, like, when I give advisement, is it from being a parent and all those things? I don't have the time or energy, even though I own my own law firm, to have to deal with disputes. So I always look at how can I prevent issues or reduce the potential of them to save time, money, and energy. Because I know you all would rather be spending your time developing your business, shooting sessions, delivering to clients, doing all of that, versus than having to be on a phone with me trying to fix an issue that we pretty much could have prevented from the beginning. Not that I won't help you if that happens, but I feel better. And it's funny, as I've had these conversations with fellow lawyers and business owners, and they're like, why do you drive the prevention stuff so much? And I said, well, real life, but yeah, I would make more money if I didn't share all this and just let everyone run wild and clean up issues all day. But it goes back to that doing good and wanting to give back and the heart thing. I want to run a heart-centered business and career. To me, it's not about the money. It comes back in other ways.
Well, and talking about, the front end of things, even when I was going to start this podcast, and I have a consultant strategist, Taylor Aller, that's helping me with all of this. And she was like, do you know a lawyer? Do you know, like, you need to get your contract? And I was like, law talk. And I was like, oh, she has a podcast stuff. Okay, well, I'm buying the bundle, because I was just like, and it is that thing where I'm like, oh yeah, I need to know all of that, and I need to have all of that in place with, my guests and with having backers and, all of that stuff. So again, even though I am a photographer for how long and have all of that in place, I was just like, oh yeah, you're right. I don't have any of that for
Well,
this.
and I think what's important, especially if there's beginner photographers or other creatives listening, you've heard all these things that you need to do. It doesn't have to be all done at once. And I don't want that to deter you from not getting into business. I get it. When I first starting my businesses, we were barely making ends meet at the time. I was waiting tables in the evenings. I was taking care of kids and going to school during the day. So I've been there. It's easy for me to kind of sit here and be forceful and say, you need all these things. That's because I'm passionate about how I know it can help you, but I'm not so removed from it that I don't understand that, you may have to save for it. Put that on your global list. Like, right, you want to save for, you're going to put aside X amount and just make a plan for it. Yeah, of course, the lawyer's like, you need it today, but real world, it doesn't work like that. And everyone has different financial situations. Who knows what any of that looks like? So if you're sitting here listening and you're freaked out, either you're overwhelmed, which I'm sorry for, or you're just thinking like money and figuring it out, give yourself some grace on it. Just take the notes, sit on it and think about it. And you can always reach out to myself and my team. We can clarify things. We can talk it through, even if you don't come to me, right? Not every client's a fit for that attorney. I'm happy to refer out. I'm happy to send resources, but that's really how the Law Talk came about, because I was in a situation where I didn't have the money to access an attorney, and I saw a need to kind of bridge the gap. And that's why we have developed the courses and the contracts. And I know they are still pretty premium, but they're in line with industry. But I get it. Just give yourself some grace if you're like stressed out right now, like, oh my gosh, I know I need all this, but I just can't afford it.
Well, and I also think too, with just talking with the law about the Law Talk, I mean, yes, of course, you go to, if you want to have a local lawyer or whatever, but get on your email list, because I'm on the email list. I see when there is things that are going to be, on sale. So if you're thinking of like where you're like, I really want that, but if it is where I'm like, I just right now can't afford that, maybe it'll be on sale.
It's funny because, I have a team that does help me now. And one of them is also ended up becoming my best friend. She came to the Law Talk working customer service, worked her way up. Then we became best friends in the process. And so she's able to be very frank with me. And she runs like the financial forecasting. And I'm like, run a sale, run a sale. And she's like, I've got a strategy. Let me be. Just because I'm like, help people.
Right. Yes. Well, and you are too, because you do have there are some free things on your site as well, including like you do offer a free business audit. And so I always want to know with that, what motivated you to create that?
I mean, kind of like this conversation, the questions you've been asking was like the number one thing that, a new photographer should have. What are the three key things? Like these are all the questions that all business owners have, and they don't know what they don't know. You don't know what to ask, right? And so that's, and I do the same thing actually at the law firm. When someone comes to me with a problem, we don't just talk about the problem. I need to look at the whole business so that I can marry whatever my action is with your business goals, because it's your reputation if we're sending a demand letter. Like, am I going to be sweet and kind, or am I going to come out full force, right? Because I'm acting on behalf of you. So back to your question, the business audit thing, I think, is really good because you can walk through. Lawyers are intimidating, I get it, and they can be expensive, but it's a good way for you to kind of get some insight into what you may be missing, what you could put on your list to look for, questions to ask if you go and talk to an attorney. And we used to do weekly lives and talking about change of seasons. I had to give that up for a bit just because the schedule is crazy, looking at bringing that back again. But yeah, we really try to pump out a lot of free resources as well. Almost too much sometimes. It can be overwhelming because there's so much, but I'm like, you guys need to know all of this. But I have to incremental information. But also, who wants to spend the whole year learning legal?
Well, some people, I guess.
No, honestly, most of the time you'll see something in a group, you'll hear from another photographer, or it's a question that pops up with your client, and that's when they come to look for the information. So the business audit is one that's more of like a preventive look at the whole view. All the other free stuff, the years of articles, podcasts, etc., I try to target to one specific question, like if bride signs contract but dad pays, who's a party to the contract, who can enforce, right? I try to keep it like one clear. That was a long-winded question, but like one clear question to be answered per article that I have.
No, that's great. Because then if people have like, they're like, I just have this one question, I saw it on in a Facebook group or whatever, they could go and maybe find that and not maybe feel overwhelmed with other things.
And I don't know if you wanted to mention AI. I'm surprised you haven't brought it up.
No, yeah, go for it. I know.
Do these days.
I know.
ChatGPT, I won't lie, I love AI. I've spoken at Harvard Business School and a couple other places on the use of AI in business and legal. AI has even told me itself. I've said, I'll ask for a photography contract, and then I'll say, what things have you left out of it? And I've already gone through it. I already know what's missing. And it will tell me some things, but it won't tell me completely. So I think it's a good stopgap, but there are some erroneous things. It doesn't define things properly. I think it's a good starting point, but like for asking questions, it's not going to take the perspective like we talked about this whole podcast. It might give you the legal, but it's not going to tell you, how do I enact this with my client? How do I explain this? You have to know the prompts in order to get that full view. And again, it's that you don't know what you don't know what to ask. And I think with AI, I say trash in, trash out. If I give it a really crappy prompt, it's going to give me a really crappy response.
I didn't even think like with AI, I wouldn't even have thought. And I guess, yeah, you can pretty much ask it whatever you want to ask it. But I guess I never would have thought, let me ask about a contract, like a legal, just because, again, what you just said, like, I don't know what to ask it. Like,
It makes up case law. We've seen this. I mean, you guys probably haven't, just because I'm in the legal field. I've seen attorneys get in trouble for using it, and it makes up cases. And you have to know what to look for, because I've seen some very clear misinformation that if I was a non-attorney, I'd go, oh yeah, that tracks, when it doesn't really track. So just be mindful if you're going to use AI. I'm not against AI at all. I love it. I think it's great.
Well, and as a photographer, I mean, I know we were like a little worried about AI there for a bit, like it was going to take our job. And it's like, no, and just use the tools. Like in Photoshop, like if I can take something out really quick, and I not sit there for a long period of time or have to send it out. I'm like, let me use it.
I tried to use ChatGPT a couple weeks ago because I didn't realize that my brand photos from when I was still married, and one of my friends was like, your wedding rings are on. I was like, okay. So I went into ChatGPT and I uploaded it, and I said, remove the wedding rings, knowing that it's probably going to make my hand all wonky. It changed my whole face, my hair color. And I went back and I said, why did you do all this? And it's like, oh, sorry, I'll redo it. And then I was another new face. It wasn't even me anymore. I'm like, forget this.
Yeah, which, yes. And I have done where they've little things that like say is a trend or something where people are
Yeah.
like, "Oh, do this." And I just did that with my dog and I was like, that's not my dog anymore, like so I again, I it's not going to take away a photographer's
Mm-mm.
job.
Well, and the other thing to consider, and we don't have to go too much into this, we've already kind of hammered copyright, but AI, stuff created with AI is relatively not protectable. So if you're creating your logo and you ever want to go to trademark it, if you even edits, which is a whole other conversation, it depends on like the substantive amount, and all of that. If you go and write a book in it, and that actually was my one viral reel that I've ever had. And it was about an author who was trying to her book got stolen and was trying to protect it. She'd use AI for the whole thing. She didn't own it.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, we're going to see law. I think the laws we're going to see, start changing with AI. Copyright Office has been coming out with guidance slowly. It's the government, but it'd be interesting to see where all that goes. But just keep in mind, like anything that is truly crucial to your business, don't use AI for contracts, your brand, like the logos, etc. Just stay away and make sure that you stick to the basics, like we mentioned.
Mm.
Create it yourself, hire someone and get the rights to it because you don't want to be in a situation where you have to rebrand or you can't protect it in the future.
Kind of going back with like the listeners and what you give to them, what's the best way for listeners to work with you? Like if it is with coaching, legal templates, courses, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so the easy thing for me to say is I'm the only Rachel Brenke. So if you go to rachelbrenke.com and it has all the different brands listed. Photographers, you can go specifically to the Law Tog. That's gonna that all my teams intertwine. They all work together. So they know like if a fitness coach comes into the Law Tog to send them to Fit Legally. So like we're not just gonna be like, go away. They're gonna pass you off. But yeah, photographers, if you're looking for contracts, courses, the free business audit, the articles, go directly to the Law Tog. If you're in a situation where you need more like a time sensitive help, or you just are like, screw this, there's too much on the Law Tog, I just want to talk to Rachel. Eden Law is my law firm, eden-law.com. But again, like it's all on Rachel Brenke. I think it's a drop down. You can go in through there. And if worst case, submit a question and they'll direct it whichever way it needs to go to help you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So I know we can find you there on
Mhm.
your website. Are there any like socials that we can find you on?
I'm primarily Facebook and Instagram for the Law Tog. That's going to be really just photography legal. If you want to get to know more about me, kind of like my Taylor Swift obsession, like we were talking pre-show, my Rachel Brenke one is kind of a hybrid of my personal life and interests as well as some business stuff. So I spent a lot more time over there. I have a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's always, we have to have, well, fun. And I also think people want to see you. Like they
Mhm.
want to get to know you. They want to know about that you are excited about Taylor Swift's new album. Like, that, and that's the thing that I've talked about with some other people in for the podcast of getting your face out there. And I know you would know that as being, helping
Mhm.
businesses.
I think that's more important than putting your work out there,
Hmm.
actually, because we just mentioned that earlier. Like, I'm more likely to hire the photographer for who they are and how they make me feel than their output.
Hmm. I've had so many people where if they're a first client of mine, they're like, when I looked at your website, I just knew that you were going to be someone fun and not stiff to work
Hmm.
with, and I knew we were going to have a good time, which makes me feel good that
Yeah.
that it's coming across that way.
Hmm.
And I just have to know, like, I just put out a video on TikTok, and as I was doing, I was like, I am making the biggest fool of myself, but I am like a goofy person.
Yeah.
And
I've had fellow lawyers say to me, how do you get clients? Like your social media is you dance into TikTok videos and your nose ring and ripped jeans. And I can't tell you how many clients, like they'll get referred to me and they'll talk to me, but they were like, we saw your social media. We didn't, if we wanted some stodgy in a suit with a tie, there's 5,000 other firms around here.
hmm. Well, Rachel, was there anything that I missed that you would want the listeners to know?
I mean, I think we covered the gamut of things. I think the biggest thing, like I already mentioned, is just take this piece by piece and don't make legal be a check mark done. I invite my clients every year. We can do it more often than once a year, but we do legal audits. Your pricing is going to change. Your policies are going to change. The laws change, especially recently. There's been a lot of consumer protection and marketing law changes, Federal Trade Commission stuff. So just making sure you're on the up and up of all that stuff. And we try to make that pretty accessible through like the newsletter, the Law Tog, meetings with me at Eden. But I think don't be scared to do the legal. You should be more scared of losing your business by not doing the legal.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you're saying, like, take it one step at a time. Don't worry about, oh my gosh, I have to learn how. Right, right. Yeah. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was amazing. I learned some stuff, so I know the listeners are going to love this.
Good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, guys, what an episode. I hope you walked away with some actionable legal tips, from contracts to copyright and liability protection, that you can implement in your own photography or creative business. So I have to tell you this little nugget. Rachel and I, prior to recording, were geeking out just a little bit over Taylor Swift. Okay, maybe a little more than a little. Her new album had just dropped. Well, not dropped, but she had talked about the new album coming. Like literally the day we recorded, she kind of dropped that she had this new album coming. And now we have the engagement news. So I just needed to let you guys know that even legal masterminds need their Swiftie moments. Also, Shutter Squad, Rachel has generously offered 20% off anything at thelawtog.com when you use the code LENS, LENS. So make sure to check that out if you want to dive deeper into protecting your business. Remember, protecting your business is part of growing it. And as always, shutter up and shine, friends.